Hello everyone, and welcome to the Gyanvah's course of HTML Masterclass. I'm really glad you're here. My name is Vishal, and today I'll be guiding you through everything you need to know about HTML, from the absolute basics to the best practices used by professionals. Whether you're completely new to web development or you're here to sharpen your skills, this session is designed to make HTML simple, clear, and practical. So let's get started. Before we dive into the technical parts, let's take a moment to understand what HTML actually is. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's the foundation of every website you've ever visited. Think of it as the structure or skeleton of a web page. In this masterclass, we'll explore what HTML does, how it shapes the content you see online, and how you can use it to build clean, engaging web pages. To understand HTML better, it helps to know how websites work behind the scenes. Whenever you open a website, your browser sends a request to a server. The server responds by sending back files, usually HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Your browser reads the HTML first, and that's what tells it what to display on the screen. So even the simplest HTML file can turn into a real interactive web page once the browser interprets it. Now let's get hands-on and create your first HTML file. Open any text editor you like, VS Code, Sublime Text, Notepad++, anything. I'm using VS Code over here. Create a new file and save it as index.html. Then type the following code. The very first line is the doctype declaration. This tells the browser that we're using HTML5, which is the modern standard. Next, we have the HTML tag. This tag wraps the entire web page and acts as the root of the document. Inside the HTML tag, we have the head section. The head contains information about the page, not visible content. Inside the head, we use the title tag. This defines the name that appears on the browser tab. Here, the title is set to My First HTML Page. After the head, we move to the body section. Everything inside the body is what actually appears on the web page. Inside the body, we have an H1 tag. This creates the main heading of the page, which in this case says Welcome to Gyanvah. Below that, we have a P tag. This is a paragraph that displays a short description. This is Gyanvah's very first HTML document. Once the code is written, I save the file. Now when I open this file in a browser, the browser reads the HTML from top to bottom and renders the heading and the paragraph on the screen. And just like that, you've created your first working HTML web page. Save the file and open it in your browser. You'll see a heading and a paragraph appear on the screen. That's your first real web page. Now let's understand the complete structure of a modern HTML web page, the way real websites are actually built today. We always start with the doctype declaration at the very top. This tells the browser that we're using HTML5, so it knows how to interpret the code correctly. Next comes the HTML tag, which wraps the entire web page. Everything related to the page, visible or not, lives inside this tag. Inside the HTML tag, the first section we define is the head. The head section contains information about the page, not content users see. This includes the page title, meta tags, viewport settings for responsiveness, and links to CSS files or scripts. After the head, we move to the body section. This is where the actual web page structure begins. At the top of the body, we usually start with a header. The header represents the top part of the web page and often contains the website name, logo, or a main heading. Inside or below the header, we commonly place the nav element. The nav section holds navigation links like home, about, courses, or contact, and helps users move around the website easily. Next comes the main element. The main tag wraps the primary content of the page, the part that is unique to that page. Inside main, we often divide content into sections. Each section groups content together, such as an introduction section, a features section, or a tutorial section. When content can stand alone, like a blog post or an article, we use the article tag. Articles are independent pieces of content that can be reused or shared separately. At the bottom of the page, we use the footer. The footer usually contains copyright information, contact details, social links, or additional navigation. So if we look at the full flow, a modern HTML page usually follows this order: doc type at the top, HTML wrapping everything, head for page information, body for visible content, header and nav at the top, main for primary content, section and article inside main, and footer at the bottom. Once you understand and follow this structure, your HTML becomes more readable, more accessible, and much easier to maintain. This structure is also better for SEO and screen readers, which is why it's considered best practice today. HTML gives you a wide variety of elements to structure and organize your content properly. To start with, we have headings. HTML provides heading tags from H1 to H6. The H1 tag is the most important heading on the page and is usually used for the main title. As the number increases, the importance of the heading decreases. For normal text content, we use the paragraph tag, which is the P tag. Any explanation or description text on a web page usually goes inside this tag. If you want to move text to the next line without starting a new paragraph, you can use the BR tag. And when you want to visually separate content, you can use the HR tag to create a horizontal line. To group content together, HTML provides the div and span tags. The div tag is a block-level container, which means it starts on a new line and can hold larger sections of content. The span tag is an inline container and is used for smaller pieces of content within a line, like a word or a phrase. Using these elements correctly keeps your HTML structured, readable, and easy to maintain. HTML also allows you to format text to improve readability and emphasis. For important text, we use the strong tag, and for bold styling, you might also see the B tag. For emphasized or italic text, we use EM or I. When you need to display subscripts, such as in chemical formulas, you use the sub tag. For superscripts, like mathematical powers, you use the sup tag. And finally, if you want to leave notes in your code that are not visible on the web page, you can use HTML comments. Comments are written like this: opening angle bracket, exclamation point, double hyphen, this is a comment, double hyphen, closing angle bracket. Comments are extremely useful for explaining sections of code or leaving reminders, and they don't affect how the web page looks at all. Once you understand how and when to use these elements, writing clean and professional HTML becomes much easier. Next, let's talk about links and images, because these two elements make web pages interactive and visually engaging. To create a link in HTML, we use the anchor tag, which is the A tag. The most important attribute of this tag is href, which tells the browser where the link should go. So when you see code like this, opening angle bracket, A, href equals https://www.example.com, closing angle bracket, visit example, opening angle bracket, /a, closing angle bracket, the text visit example becomes clickable, and when the user clicks it, they're taken to the specified website. Links are the backbone of the web. They connect pages together and allow users to move easily from one resource to another. Now let's look at images. Images are added using the image tag. This tag uses the src attribute to define the path of the image file. The alt attribute is just as important. Alt text provides a textual description of the image. So in this example, opening angle bracket, image, source equals images/landscape.jpg, alt equals beautiful landscape, closing angle bracket, the browser loads the image from the given path and the alt text describes what the image represents. Alt text is extremely important for accessibility, especially for screen readers used by visually impaired users. It also helps with SEO because search engines use alt text to understand image content. If an image fails to load, the alt text is displayed instead, which improves the user experience. Using links and images correctly makes your web page more informative, accessible, and user-friendly. HTML also lets you organize content using lists and tables. Ordered lists use numbers, while unordered lists use bullet points. Tables are great for displaying structured data and consist of rows, headers, and cells. Now let me show you how lists and tables actually work using HTML code. First, let's talk about lists. When I want to show items in a particular order, I use an ordered list. I start with the OL tag, which tells the browser that this is a numbered list. Inside that, every individual item is written using the LI tag. So each LI represents one item in the list, and the browser automatically numbers them for me. This is useful when I'm showing steps, instructions, or rankings. Now, when the order doesn't matter, I use an unordered list. Here, I replace OL with UL. Everything else stays the same. I still use the LI tag for each item. In this case, instead of numbers, the browser shows bullet points. This is very common for feature lists, menus, or highlights on a web page. Now let's move on to tables. Whenever I need to display structured data, like comparisons or records, I use a table. I start with the table tag, which tells the browser that I'm creating a table. Inside the table, I create rows using the TR tag. Each row can contain header cells or data cells. For the top row, I usually use TH tags. These are table headers, and they describe what each column represents. For the remaining rows, I use TD tags. Each TD holds actual data. So if you look at a table visually, every horizontal line is a TR, every column heading is a TH, and every data value is a TD. Tables help keep related data aligned and easy to read, which is why they should be used only for data, not for page layout. Once you understand how OL, UL, LI, table, TR, TH, and TD work together, organizing content in HTML becomes very simple and clean. Forms are another essential part of HTML because they allow users to input information. A simple form might look like this. We start with the form tag. The action attribute tells us where the form data will be sent once the user submits it. In this case, /submit represents the server endpoint that will handle the data. The method attribute defines how the data is sent. Here we're using post, which means the data is sent securely in the background, not visible in the URL. Inside the form, the first thing we have is a label. This label describes the input field and is linked to it using the for attribute. The value of for matches the ID of the input field, which improves accessibility and usability. Next, we have an input element with the type set to text. This creates a text box where the user can type their name. The name attribute is very important because this is the key that gets sent to the server along with the user's input. Finally, we have another input with the type set to submit. This creates a submit button. When the user clicks this button, the browser collects all the form data and sends it to the URL to find in the action attribute. So overall, this simple form allows the user to enter their name and submit it to the server, which is the basic idea behind login forms, sign-up forms, and contact pages. Once you understand how form, label, and input work together, building more advanced forms becomes much easier. As you build more advanced web pages, you'll start using semantic HTML elements. These are special tags that don't just wrap content, but actually describe what that content means. For example, the header tag is used for the top part of a web page or a section. It usually contains the website name, logo, or a main heading. The nav tag is used for navigation links like home, courses, or contact. Using nav makes it clear that these links are meant for moving around the website. The section tag is used to group related content together. For instance, if you're building a site like Gyanvah, you might have one section for HTML basics and another section for advanced topics. When content can stand on its own, such as a blog post or a tutorial, we use the article tag. An article makes sense even if it's read independently from the rest of the page. At the bottom of the page, we use the footer tag. This typically contains copyright information, contact details, or extra links. So, if we imagine a simple web page, the website title at the top goes inside header, the menu links go inside nav, the main content goes inside section, an individual tutorial goes inside article, and the bottom information goes inside footer. Using these semantic tags gives meaning to your HTML, which improves accessibility, helps screen readers, and makes your pages more SEO friendly. It also makes your code cleaner, more readable, and easier to maintain. Once you start using semantic HTML, your web pages look more professional, not just visually, but structurally as well. Now let's talk about media elements in HTML, starting with audio and video. HTML allows you to embed media directly into your web page using the audio and video tags. This means users can play sound or watch videos without leaving your website. When you use the audio tag, you usually add the controls attribute. This gives the user play, pause, and volume controls automatically. Inside the audio tag, we use the source tag to specify the audio file and its type. If the browser does not support the audio format, a fallback message can be displayed. The video tag works in a very similar way. It allows you to embed videos directly on the page and also supports controls like play, pause, and full screen. You can define the video width and height, and just like audio, you use the source tag to point to the video file. If the browser can't play the video, it shows a fallback message. Using audio and video tags correctly helps make your web pages more interactive and user-friendly. Now, when you start building websites for different screen sizes, responsive design becomes very important. One of the most essential steps for responsiveness is adding the viewport meta tag inside the head section. This tag tells the browser to match the page width with the device width and scale the content properly. Without this tag, your website may appear zoomed out or broken on mobile devices. Even though CSS handles most of the responsive layout, this single line of HTML is mandatory for mobile-friendly websites. Next, let's talk about accessibility, which is a critical part of modern web development. Accessibility means making sure that everyone, including users with disabilities, can use your website. This includes adding alt text to images so screen readers can describe them, using proper labels for form inputs, structuring pages with semantic HTML tags, using ARIA attributes only when semantic HTML is not enough, and ensuring the website can be fully navigated using a keyboard. Accessible websites are not only inclusive, but they're also easier to use and better for SEO. As you continue learning, following HTML best practices will make your code cleaner and more professional. Always keep your HTML properly indented so it's easy to read. Avoid inline styles and separate structure from design. Write meaningful comments to explain sections of your code. Use semantic markup instead of unnecessary divs, and regularly validate your HTML to catch errors early. Clean HTML is easier to maintain, easier to debug, and easier to scale. To bring everything together, I've created a simple Gyanvah website using only HTML.
This project uses the same concepts we covered in this session: page structure, headings, images, navigation, lists, tables, forms, and semantic elements. You'll find the complete website code linked in the description. I strongly recommend that you go through the code carefully, open it in your editor, and try running it in your browser. Don't just watch, practice by modifying the code. Change the text, add new sections, tweak the structure, and see how HTML behaves. That hands-on practice is where real learning happens. And here's the most important takeaway. HTML is the backbone of the web. Once you understand HTML clearly, building websites starts to feel logical instead of confusing. Keep practicing, keep experimenting, and your confidence will grow naturally. Thank you for learning with Gyanvah. This is Vishal. Happy learning, happy coding.